Hi, everybody. Is this on? Yeah? Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm not sure. Hello? Now? Now? Hello? Hello? Okay, there I go. Hi. I'm a little short on my cord here. It's fine. I think everyone can hear me. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today at Gallery 400. I am Lorelei Stewart, director here at Gallery 400 at the University of Illinois at Chicago. It is my pleasure to welcome all of these new and old faces to Gallery 400. And we are so pleased to be hosting this symposium today with all of our fabulous speakers. I cannot wait to hear everything about their histories and the work that they've done together and the ways that this work is being brought forward into today. This show has taken so many people to put together, and I firstly have to say that it is a personal pleasure to be working with VGA Gallery. Jonathan Kinkley and Chaz Evans were both graduate assistants here at UIC when they were in the grad program at UIC, so it's amazing to have them back here working again. And what they've built at VGA is just remarkable. If you haven't been there, please go. It has also been a fantastic pleasure to work with Jon Cates, curator of the exhibition and our moderator for today. It's an amazing show. I can't wait for you to see it later today. And Jon has just been so smart, generous, kind, a real pleasure to work with. Also, I must recognize Gallery 400's fantastic staff who have really pulled it through in many different kinds of challenges. I'm sure you can all imagine. Our preparators, our graduate assistants, and our community engagement public programs manager, Marcela Torres, have been fantastic. So we have a number of people who are going to speak today. I'm going to hand over the microphone to Jonathan Kinkley, who is the executive director of VGA Gallery. But I just want to say thank you again, Jonathan and Chaz and Jon, for all that you've done. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorelei, and thank you to Gallery 400 for being such an amazing partner for this incredible project that we're so excited to share with you. As Lorelei said, my name is Jonathan Kinkley. For those of you who don't know, VGA Gallery stands for Video Game Art Gallery. We're a nonprofit devoted to video games, as you might expect, and new media, and we're located at 2418 West Bloomingdale. We have a couple supporters we want to thank. for making this project possible. It is an official program of Art Design Chicago, which is a citywide celebration of art and design in the city, organized by the Terra Foundation. Terra Foundation is also a major supporter for this project, along with the Driehaus Foundation, Chicago Community Trust, the Goethe Institute. We also received additional support from the School of the Art Institute's Video Data Bank. And we're also grateful to the Andy Warhol Foundation, the School of Art and Art History here at the College of Architecture, Design, and the Arts at UIC. And it's been amazing to partner not only with Gallery 400, but also with the historic Electronic Visualization Lab here on campus that we're going to hear so much today about. So without further ado, I'm delighted to welcome Jon Cates, the amazing curator of Chicago New Media, to the stage.
Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you, Lorelei, and especially a very special thank you. Thank you, Jamie, for freeing the cable just now. And a very special thank you to all of you who are here today in person to share in this conversation, which is the symposium connected to the exhibition Chicago New Media 1973 to 1992. Also, thank you to everyone who is with us on these internets that you've heard so much about. They are joining us via a live stream that we're sending out via YouTube. So we want to thank everyone who is logging in and joining us virtually, digitally, online on the internet. Also, I'd like to begin by acknowledging that today's event and the exhibition, the gallery, and the school itself are being held on the traditional homelands of the indigenous First Nations people of the Kaskaskia, the Miami, the Peoria, and the Potawatomi nations. I pay my respect to the land, the elders, and their people, their past, present, and future leaders. Welcome to today's event. Especially welcome to all of the artists and media art historians who we have in the room. I know that when these types of events get started, when someone such as myself is standing in front of you saying a few words to kick it off, you hear a lot of lists of people who need to be thanked. And sometimes that kind of listing can get a little bit like you feel like, okay, yes, there's a lot of people who need to be thanked. But it's a real reality in this case that this has been a project that we've all been working on for about 2 years, a little bit longer than 2 years. And so there have been so many people involved in such critical moments that it's really very, very important that we understand that it's a massive group effort, and we're deeply indebted to everyone who is working together to make this happen. Today, we are joined by artists who are exhibiting and participating in the exhibition. There are many artists who are exhibiting in the exhibition who are here with us in the audience. We want to acknowledge that, and hopefully we will have a chance because that's the way it's structured. We will have a chance to all have a discussion. So thank you to those exhibiting artists who are here with us in the audience. Some of the exhibiting artists will also be here on stage, on the panel, but this is structured really as a conversation, as a discussion. Now, I've been saying informally to everyone that I think of this as a kind of extended family reunion. It's a kind of intergenerational exchange. So we have new media art that represents genealogies and generations of people who've been working across those generations. We also have people, many of the same people, who are teachers. And it's because of their generosity as teachers that they have built these generations, they've built these genealogies where we can see these ideas get expressed and extended over time, remixed and reworked in many different ways. So it's super exciting. Christiane Paul comes to us today from New York. She is the curator of new media art at the Whitney Museum of American Art. We are very happy to have Christiane Paul with us today. Oliver Grau comes to us from Österreich, from Austria. He is the professor for image science at the Danube University and a founder in the field of media art histories. Along with Christiane Paul, he is a publisher of many important and an author of many important books. Both Christiane and Oliver have written many important books. on the field of digital art in Christiana's case, and in the field of immersive art and interactivity in Oliver's case. So they are here with us to speak on those topics that they are founders and teachers in the field of, also curators. Ellen Sandor. She is the co-editor of New Media Futures, a book which I hope that you are all aware of, and if you are not, you should be, and you are now. It is called New Media Futures, The Rise of Women in the Digital Arts. Ellen Sandor is a participating artist. She is exhibiting, and she has two pieces that are part of her work and the work of her collaborative that are in the exhibition. So you will see those when the exhibition opens today at 5 o'clock. She has a career which spans a series of decades, and that is another amazing, important part of what we have here today. We have artists who were working at revolutionary moments, and they have continued to produce work in very profound ways. Presenting together, I believe, are Dan Sandin and Tom DeFonte. Is that correct? Presenting together, absolutely. As a team, the team of Dan Sandin and Tom DeFonte. A team that you are most likely aware of. You should be if you are not. If you are from here, from the University of Illinois at Chicago, you know that they together are founders of the Electronic Visualization Lab here at the University of Illinois at Chicago. So they are also founders and artists and developers, scientists who are working together to build new and exciting technologies, including virtual reality, and before that, live, real-time, analog image synthesis with the Sandin image processor, and new programming languages with the Grau programming language. So this is an incredible opportunity to hear directly from them. Also, a super important innovator in the area of software art, Jamie Faye Fenton. She joins us today, recently relocated to Chicago, but previously from San Francisco. Jamie Faye Fenton, who was also a crucial, critical part of this community here in Chicago. And what she created is the Bally Basic programming language, which also is directly related to the Grau programming language and was used in combination with the Sandin image processor and was used by artists who are exhibiting in the exhibition. Her work also is exhibited in the exhibition, so you can see her work. Her work has been recently enjoying a kind of fantastic revival that I myself am very excited about, because it has been rediscovered by a younger generation of glitch artists across Facebook who have now realized that in 1979, Jamie Faye Fenton created some of the first glitch art that was intentionally hacking in a very dirty new media way the platform of the Bally Basic arcade system, working with art and games. So we have her here also to thank. And Sabrina Raff, who is another artist who is exhibiting in the exhibition. You can see her important work in the exhibition. She is also an associate professor here at the University of Illinois at Chicago, and she teaches in the School of Art and Art History, where we are, which is our host. So Sabrina will speak to the ways in which her work also comes out of certain types of traditions and goes in new directions. And she will also speak to, and we can all have a conversation about the process of teaching generations, and the importance of these media art histories for making the art, the contemporary art, the most contemporary of contemporary arts, which we call new media art, which in some ways is not so new anymore, but is also perennially new, always already new. So we'll begin by hearing about some of those histories from Oliver Grau, and then we will hear about more of those histories from Christiane Paul, and then we will make a kind of switch and hear from the artists themselves, and we will move through, and then everyone as you present, and then we would ask you to present and then sit on the panel. And once everyone has given a short presentation to just let you know who they are and what they're thinking about and feeling about today, then we will have a big group discussion with the panelists and with all of us together. So thanks again for being here, and we'll start with Oliver Grau.
Yeah, while this is starting, thank you very much for the honorable invitation. Thank you very much, John, especially, and all the other organizers, especially Jonathan and Schatz, and also thanks to the Goethe Institute who brought me in. So I'm particularly glad to be again in Chicago among such esteemed colleagues. Some I know for a long time, like John and others, and so, one, Sandin, I see again after 15 years or so. I think we have a very brief interrogation many years ago, and most of you I see for the very first time. So I'm looking forward for our discussions later on. I would like to address three things: the position of media arts, which is very broad, of course, and difficult to say in a few words. It's research and the concept of immersion in connection with Chicago. So far, not museums, but exhibitions and festivals can be considered as the most important media for current developments regarding issues, technologies, and discourses on digital art. Although the biennial project at the ZKM in Karlsruhe revealed that digital artworks play a part at more than 200 biennials around the world, and our ATMA project at Danube University lists over 100 additional festivals dedicated only to digital art, those complex art and image forms have almost not arrived into the core collecting institutions of our societies, the museums, the archives, the libraries, funded by us in Europe, especially by the tax-paying public. Compared to traditional art forms like painting or sculpture, digital media art has a multifarious and complex potential of dynamic, interactive expression and visualization, and therefore it became, we might say, the art of our time. Thematizing complex challenges of our societies like genetic engineering, globalization, and ecological crises, the image and media revolution, the virtualization of finance markets, and new extremes of surveillance, just to name a few clusters, where digital art plays a similar role in thematizing and visualizing those. Although even by law, it is the duty, at least in Europe, of museums to collect, preserve, and document the art of its time, this is simply not done in an adequate and concerted way. And this disparity even creates a serious, I would say, democratic political problem. So while our own secret services, that's right, for the first time know basically everything about our citizens, we are, for example, in the largest archive ever existing, we are ironically unwanted but widely excluded by our own museums and archives from reflecting on the issues, which I just mentioned a few of them, of our time through its relevant art. So in the best humanistic tradition, digital art frequently takes on big contemporary discussions, challenges, dangers, and proposed transformations of our life and societies. Thus, digital art is the art form with the most comprehensive potential in the reflection of our information societies regarding the digital revolution. Second, it is essential, though, to create an understanding of the fact that the present image revolution, which uses new technologies and has also developed a large number of so far unknown visual expressions, cannot be conceptualized without our image history, which is why the field of media art histories and this conference series agrees with a plea of its first honorary chair, Rudolf Arnheim, published in 2000. I remember it was 98 then already when he published that with Leonardo. And so all of us might be happy that we arrived at the age of 98 and then still giving a comment of the latest development in the visual field, like interactivity. It's amazing. So he published this in 2000 for integrating the new interactive and processual worlds of images into the experiences and insights that have come down to us from the art of the past. By telling, for example, the history of illusion and immersion, the history of artificial life, or the tradition of telepresence, media art history offers sub-histories of the present image revolution. And so does Chicago New Media 72 to 92. These histories in mind, we developed through a collective process the International Conference Series on the Histories of Media, Art, Science, and Technology, which was started in 2005 in Banff and held since then every 2 years on another continent. Contributions to the field are widespread and include researchers from history of science like Grau and Destin, art history and image science, Barbara Stefford, art theory and curatorship, Christiane Powell, media studies and media archaeology like Buchtamo, sound studies, Dakan, film studies, Cubit, etc. Media art history might be considered a reservoir in which contemporary processes are embedded in anthropologic narration on the one hand, and the political battleground where the clash of images is analyzed on the other. Furthermore, art historical methods may strengthen our political aesthetic analysis of the present through image analysis. But today, not only media art itself, but also its scientific documentation fades. So that future generations will not be able to get an idea of the art of our time. One exception is ADA, so a pioneering archive of digital art started in '99. Nowadays, I would say the most complex documentation of the field. And this precarious situation of media art research led to our International Media Art History Liverpool Declaration, signed by more than 450 scholars from 40 countries today. You find it on the platform of the fields of mediaarthistory.org. There is urgent need to create stable international platforms of interoperable archives to share resources, to build expertise for collection and research. So that's what this declaration is about. I'm coming already to the end. Human drones and their ruler. This could be a caption of this photo, which shows Mark Zuckerberg at a Samsung press conference 2 years ago. And this might look like an Orwellian dystopia for surveillance capitalism's oligarch. It is Brave New World. Zuckerberg, quote, "One day, we believe this kind of immersive augmented reality will become a part of daily life for billions of people. But communality of a conference, literally from confere, to bring together, is broken for a series of hyper-individualized bubbles. And we are reminded, as Washington Post has put it, quote, that the man who owns the bubbles also owns what's in them. That controlling virtual reality, in other words, is only a step from controlling reality itself." A description of someone who cooperates, as we know, since years with the NSA, delivers all our data to the NSA, and developed elements of Facebook technology with the NSA. So some of you know that I worked on the pros and cons of immersion for many years. I could show that immersion is a key, I would say, to the understanding of the development of media, and that there is permanent cross-fertilization between large-scale spaces of immersion, which you see here a few of them, that fully integrate the human body, like 360-degree frescoes, the panorama, stereopticon, cineorama, IMAX cinemas, or the cave, and small-scale images positioned immediately in front of the eyes, like peep shows over the 17th century, stereoscopic television, sensorama, and head-mounted displays. Immersion was used for political and religious propaganda to impress people in private spaces and world fairs, and has truly a dark side. It often is characterized by diminishing critical distance and increasing emotional involvement. On the other hand, immersion can be also an intellectually stimulating process, and that is where Dan Sandin worked parallel to other big names in the field like Jeffrey Shaw, Maurice Benayoun, de Christiane, and Michael Neymar. And Sandin has said, and I guess Tom DeFante is on the same page, that he's following three main objectives: design of electronic instruments and computer programs for visual performance and personal growth, very important, development of educational programs related to the use of electronic screens and the production of exhibition of works for personal expressive reasons. And I look forward to talk more intergenerational on the emancipative side Dan shares with the artist mentioned. So thank you very much, and I hand over.
Thank you so much, Oliver. And I'm going to basically pick up where Oliver left off, jumping into the now. But first of all, I also want to thank all the organizers for bringing me here. It's really a great honor to be with all of the pioneers, or many of them, who have really made such contributions to creating the current environment. In addition to being the curator of digital art at the Whitney Museum, I'm also a professor of media studies and the director and chief curator of the Sheila Johnson Design Center, meaning the galleries, at the New School. And I think what is really important to this conference and environments is the role that educational institutions can play in really nurturing a medium and practice in a medium. So today we are supposedly living in the post-digital condition. I have lots of criticisms of the term of the post-digital in terms of its temporality, but I don't want to get into that. I think it describes a very real condition right now of artworks and things that are conceptually and physically shaped by the internet and digital processes, and take the language for granted, yet often manifest in the material form of objects. The post-digital finds its expression in works that are informed by digital technologies and network, but cross boundaries between media and their final form. Many of the young artists do web-based work that has sculptural components that would not be thinkable without digital technologies, but there's a return to materiality. So the post-digital also describes the embeddedness of the digital in the objects, images, and structures we encounter on a daily basis, and also captures the process of seeing like and being seen through digital devices. And very often the term is used to describe an embrace of the fusion of art, commerce, advertising, and design. A lot of my work has focused on creating genealogies for this post-digital condition, because it wouldn't be possible without all of the contributions that some of the pioneers in this room have made. And I find it very interesting that in the current moment, we are looking in contemporary artistic practice within the digital, on the one hand, to a return to materiality, this post-digital now of objects that involve digital technologies, and at the same time, the third wave of VR, AR, immersive technologies. So today you encounter a lot of work among younger practitioners in the area of glitch aesthetics, corruption artifacts, or data meshed video frames. But all of that work, of course, goes back to practices such as those by Dan Sandin and others. This is an image of a work by Clement Wallach, postcards from Google Earth. Disclaimer, this is not the best example of glitch art. Jon is such an expert in that field, because as Clement would say, it is the logical extension of the software. So he actually goes out on Google Earth and collects images of these ruptures. And these are actually just the moments where the photography and data mapping software not coalesce anymore, and it leads to these weird landscapes on Google Earth. But that work also really goes back to experimentation with glitch in the work of Namjoon Paik and Shuya Abe in their Wobulator, or of course, Dan Sandin's image processor. And it's not that this work is forgotten. In fact, many young artists also explicitly reference it. In 2011, I curated a solo show of Cory Archangel's work for the Whitney Museum of American Art. And one of the pieces in that show was Cory's another 5-minute romp through the IP, referencing Dan's 5-minute romp through the IP. And Cory had actually used an IP at Alfred University during a residency, and for an extended period of time, pressed its buttons, generated imagery that was then edited. I think one of the reasons why Cory's work has been very successful is that he really situates it within art history and is very well aware of his predecessors and the people who created the language he works with today. So as I mentioned, apart from a certain kind of return to materiality in post-digital practices, we are also seeing a third wave of work within virtual reality. So you have here on the left one of the earliest headsets from '68, and on the right you can see in hairstyle and clothing, this is the '80s, and Jaron Lanier with the data glove and a new version of the headset. So these as the immersive headset spaces, and as Oliver already pointed out, there's a difference between that and the immersive stereoscopic environments that were created by pioneers such as Dan and Tom DeFanti. And for a curator, this is actually, to some extent, an easier environment to work with, because your audience can at least get an idea of what is unfolding in that landscape, which I think will increasingly be the case in the future. We are seeing a current trend in contemporary virtual reality exhibitions to really create installations for every work and translate it into physical space. Once again, there is this certain kind of post-digital moment of translating parts of the virtual world into the physical world, or using installation to build the connection between the two. And I think in the future, we will see much more advanced environments that mesh the virtual and the physical. And I want to, in closing, also point to one of my exhibitions that just opened at the Whitney Museum of American Art, programmed rules, codes, and choreographies in art, which actually includes some of the work that is related to the Chicago new media scene. And picking up on what Oliver said, I'm making a great effort to do precisely what is needed and bringing more of these works into the collection. Since last year, the Whitney Museum has a digital art acquisition committee, which I'm spearheading, and programmed really tries to outline histories of digital art and programmed art. The exhibition showcases instruction and rule-based art over several decades and is divided into two main sections. One section looks at the roots of programmed instruction-based art in conceptual art practices and language-based conceptual art. The other section of the exhibition looks at instruction-based art as it manipulates image sequences, works with the television and its apparatus manipulating signals. So more work related to Dan Sandin's practice, for example. And this is just one view through the exhibition, where you in the back see Namjoon Paik's Fin de Siècle, in the foreground one of Solowitz's sculptural structures, and on the wall a juxtaposition of Joseph Alber's works that play with color and transparency using rules, juxtaposed with John F. Simon Jr.'s color panel version 1.0, one of the works that really Cates Bauhaus color theory. And this is a view in the other direction where you see in the back Casey Rear's work that appears once again next to Sol LeWitt. So the conceptual section also incorporates a lot of early computer drawing, and amongst it, the works by Joan Truckenbrod, also part of the Chicago scene and sitting in the front row here. So we were very happy to bring Joan's work into the Whitney Museum's collection last year. So featured in the show are a couple of her early computer drawings written in Fortran, and Joan is very much in her algorithmic experimentation interested in algorithms that relate to nature, to air, to light, which translates in her work in several ways. And we're showing those drawings along with her work, Curvilinear Perspective, which is textile. And she was invited actually to use the color copier acquired by the university. And I think you told me your first reaction also was, what do I do with that? That's not my practice, I code. And then very cleverly and beautifully incorporated it by just putting the monitor of her Apple IIe computer onto the Xerox machine. And what you see here, the rectangles are actually the monitor of the machine, then manipulated and printed on transparency heat transferred to textile. And the textile is also suspended in the exhibition space so that it flows in the air a little bit. So this is just one example or a few examples of those practices that originated here. There's a lot more to say about that in detail and within the bigger picture, but I think it's really terrific to have this in-depth view at the Chicago scene and also take a look at how a specific educational environment, artistic environment really creates influential practices. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Now we'll have a presentation from Ellen Sandor.
We're going to change computers. Thank you. So I'm talking to you today through rose-colored glasses because we all need it. We desperately need to look at the world through rose-colored glasses. So there we go. Okay. John? Yeah, all right. Okay, so John said 10 minutes lightning talk. So here we go. Let's see if I could do it in 10 minutes. 1972, School of the Art Institute of Chicago and body sculpture. Yahoo! Okay, very sexy neon. Actually, we did Picasso's erotic drawings and we sold them to all the traders for a lot of money. As you see on top here, we have Modigliani. We have Fiorucci, a commercial job. I was so excited. It was so wonderful. And then the Money House, a bank. Okay. So there we go. And it's 1983. And in 1981, I was commissioned by a Wall Street person to do a 3D postcard, but a very, very large 3D postcard. Understand, I didn't even know what the word immersive environment meant. Okay, so there's of course Randy Johnson and Mark Rush, and there's Jim Zanzi, and there's our garage art camera. And there's the first hard copy immersive environment that we showed in Chicago in 1983. Again, it's hard copy, but it's real 3D. And what happened was Phil Morton and Dan Sandin and Tom DeFonte saw it and said to me, one day we'll take this digital. This is an immersive environment. And again, I had no idea what that meant. And it was a lot of fun. So it was a photograph. It was, at that time, SEBA film and a barrier strip technology. Okay, this is the first digital digital scologram, and it was shot off the computer screen. So there was no software involved at the time, but the content was digital. So it was Ellen Test 2 and Hedgehog on either side. Okay, 1986, we went down to NCSA, and we saw Donna Cox and George Francis and all the fabulous ones. And what did we do? Rhomboid homotopies, 4-dimensional mathematical models. I had no idea what we were doing. And it was so much fun, and it was stunning, absolutely stunning. Donna Cox, thank you, thank you. Tom and Dan, thank you. So what happened was, at this time, the feature gallery, Hudson has now passed away. But if anyone knows anything about the gallery system in the early days, Hudson showed work in New York and Chicago that no one did in the beginning. In fact, he showed people like Cindy Sherman early and Richard Prince, and we got to collect it in the early days. But at that time, he actually showed 4-dimensional mathematical models in New York City. And there we all are. Okay, NASA Ames Research Center gave us a big commission, and I actually have a whole wall in the house of NASA Ames pictures. Lots of fun, even Mars. This was a little more serious. We did by 1987, we did the first AIDS virus, and it was, again, many of our friends were passing away from AIDS at that time, and they didn't have the cocktail that was keeping everyone alive. So what we did was 80%, not 100%, just 80% scientifically correct. And in the background was a CAT scan. And the name of the person who had passed away was called Messiah. So we colorized the CAT scan, and we actually traveled it all over the country. And the show was from the independent curators, and one of them remembered it when I saw them the other day. And then in 1990, the U.S. Art and Embassy program showed it in Zimbabwe. And the ambassador wrote me a letter that it opened up discussion, because they couldn't discuss it in those days. And so the color was beautiful and all kinds of excitement, so they were able to actually discuss it. And that meant a lot to me. Okay. We actually did, at that time, the EpiView process. And I'm going to go back if I can, because believe it or not, this is the second one. The first one, I think, was in 93, but in 94, in the early days, remember, 2018 is the 25th anniversary of Mosaic web browser, okay? And Art to the Nth was the first person, a little tiny group, to put an online gallery on the web with curated images. Again, half the time we didn't know what we were doing, but it turned out just fine. The web, our site in 1994 at Northwestern University at the Burrell Research Park. All right. The EpiView process, again, pet studies, medical imaging, all kinds of exciting things. All right. Now, this one is at the Smithsonian, and it's actually still there because, again, it's a hard copy, immersive environment. So you don't have to worry about a virtual reality, and it's perfect for a museum. It took 20 years to put new media in my living room. I have a major collection. Get it? 20 years. So this was a museum who was comfortable with putting hard copy. And I salute all of you. Stand up, darling, for a second. Just stand up, Connie. Go ahead. Because she works every single day to try to put new media in collections. Every day. It's not easy, okay? All right, so that's the Salt Crystal. It was a difficult, fun commission, and actually what you're doing is you actually are 27 panels, and the viewer can feel like they're appearing inside the structure of the Salt Crystal. So it's still there, and I love to have people tell me about it. All right. So another amazing commission with Steven Spielberg and the Museum of Jewish Heritage. We work with Carolina's group, and Carolina runs a lab right now in Little Rock. So there are some of these images now. All right. Oh, this one I still love going through again, this is all on the prairie. This is on the prairie, Midway Airport. Cheap flights. Wonderful. Okay? All right? I walk through here and I go, Yes, because what happened was I got everyone who was still alive in 1990, all the veterans that, oh, I'm going to cry. Okay, I got all the veterans that were still alive in 1990. We put together this whole commission piece inside, scholograms, oh my God. We even, at that time, celebrated the intelligence community because the Battle of Midway was won because of the intelligence community. Those were the good guys in those days. Do you understand? This was the battle that changed everything and one of the reasons I'm alive. So this is during the good days. We forget. President Haight was not there, okay? All right, this is the veteran. In 2012, when I was 70 years old, he went to the island. He raised the flag in my honor at my 70th birthday, brought it to the house, and presented it to me. And on the 10th, I'm actually going to be his date. I think he's like 100 by now at the Marine Ball. So there he is, Ed Fox. Yay, Ed. Okay. So as far as superstars in the art world, the Imagists in Chicago, the superstars. So I got a real chance to work with Ed Paschke, and those, of course, to this day still go for a lot of money. How do I feel about pieces that go for a lot of money? How do I feel about art and money? I have no choice. It makes me nauseous, but I do it anyway. Okay, there you go. Roger Brown, Mr. Imagination, God bless you wherever you are. Oh, you know, Carl Worsom. Carl Worsom is now in the show of the Harry Who, and this particular image, he actually hangs in his house. And it was a lot of work to do this one, but it's absolutely perfect because with new media, things are not perfect, and especially with scholograms, but this one is absolutely perfection. It's about the Harry Who. I love it. Okay, right. Oh, this one is a telomerase project on imminent immortality. So it's the year 2000. I'm trying to find a scientist to work with about immortality. Now, I'm not saying I want to be there forever, okay? I'm not ready yet, but I'm not quite sure I'm ready. I couldn't find a scientist. This is the truth. We had to find an underground scientist to work with because it wasn't an acceptable field. And guess what? In 2009, Elizabeth Blackburn and Carol Greider shared a Nobel Prize for their discovery of telomerase. There you go. Never give up. We showed it in New York, too. Love architecture. I have a serious Jones for architecture. Can't help it. Okay, there we have the Roby House. We have Nouvelle Nouvelle. We have all kinds of wonderful sculptures, deconstructed images. And then, of course, we have this one, which I absolutely love. And we have a VR piece about it. The Crystal Chapel. Bruce Goff never actually built it. So we took his drawings and we deconstructed it. It's a stunning piece. And in VR, of all my VR pieces, I have one friend who has anxiety, and she actually comes to the lab to see just this piece because it calms her down. Who knows what comes? It just is something that she does a lot. So I kind of love this piece. Okay. Another privilege, I got to be a resident, artist in resident at the Fermi Lab from 2016 to 17, and we collaborated with all the absolutely wonderful scientists, and we did VR and we did scholograms. We did all kinds of fun, wonderful things. Bassarelli, eat your heart out. On the left, we have neutrinos colliding. And then, and I'm still doing it, dear. And then I happen to have one of my grandsons who has a severe autism, and he still can't speak, but he was not able to communicate until 2016. And one of the first things he communicated to me, and it's actually on videotape, very strange, is that I should study something called CRISPR. And again, this is very controversial because it's about gene editing. And he's a prisoner in his body, and he wants to have a normal brain. Now, to me, his brain is beautiful, but he believes that if I study CRISPR, and it's going fast, guys, we haven't really done it on a human being yet, but the Chinese have. And this is one of the revolutions, okay, gene editing. Yes, it's controversial, but to people where it's going to cure diseases and it's going to help people get out of their prisons, their own prisons, it's worth it. So I got to work with Jennifer, who invented it at Berkeley, and it's 100% scientifically correct. But the VR piece I'm doing, he came up with the title, A Ray of Light. Could you imagine? He spelled it out on an analog. He spelled it out. And there what I did was basically Man Ray, rayographs. I did Ruth Bernard images. And then, of course, we're going to have the Cast 9. And that's almost finished. That's almost finished. And here we go. The piece that you're going to see. It's Have a Nice Day. God bless you, Martil. I know you're in heaven. Martil invented the doomsday clock. The doomsday clock is the symbol of the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists. Basically, her husband was seriously involved in plutonium, and it was heavy. So when they all got together, what she did was say, this is the clock about doomsday, and we're going to try to tell you what time it is every year. This year, you know it's 2 minutes to midnight, okay? But we can push the clock, the hands of the clock back. 2018 in VR will tell you how to push it back, but the history is from 47 to 17, and I want you to see that. So Martil just didn't want to pass away at the age of 96 and only be known as the inventor of the doomsday clock. She was a painter, and she did all these landscape paintings. So we made sure we incorporated all the textures. God bless you. There you go, and you'll get to see this. And Fractal Forest. Okay, John Hart spent the entire summer in 90 or 91. Is that correct? I think it was 90 or 91 at IBM. And it took every computer at the time to do this, and every single leaf is a fractal. And we just took sort of a screenshot that was in 3D. So that's Fractal Forest, and you'll get to see that. I only have one copy. Usually I always make lots of copies of lots of things, and this one I only have one copy, so I really hope, again, you know, nothing happens to it, and this is what, okay. So here we go. The Pioneers on the Prairie. Amazing. The book is stunning. Really, it's a gift. It's inexpensive. It tells everything about everything that happened with the pioneers. And I'm going to have you all stand up. Who's ever in this room, please stand up, guys. You so deserve it. Who's ever the pioneers, just stand up, just so you'll get to see. Where are you? Where are you? Woo! Last weekend, we had such a good time. Oh my God, we really had fun. And that's the best part of life now, having a little fun. Here we are on a magical bus. Okay, there you go. More and more and more. But I do want to thank Tom and Dan for opening up their doors to EVL for the magical mystery trip that they took us on. So come on, guys, let's come up and do your thing. Woo!
John, you passed me.
While we're transitioning, I'll tell you that Ellen was one of the organizers of a conference that happened at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago that coincided with the publication of the book. And that conference, that symposium, was the direct inspiration also for us to do the exhibition. So, you know, we are here in a genealogical sense.
Thank you very much for all the kind words about what Tom and I have been doing for a long time. First of all, what am I supposed to do, Tom? Can everybody hear me? Yeah, but they're not there. Oh, I learned to talk loud as a professor in order to keep the students awake, so I don't normally need a microphone. Tom and I have been working together for a long time, and I front in the artist community probably more, and Tom fronts in the engineering and science community more. But all the artworks that I've been involved with and have my name on it and Tom's name on it, and all the artworks that even don't have Tom names on it, are collaborations of Tom and me. So I'm going to go back to the kind of beginning of my work in Chicago. So in 1969, I was invited by Chicago Circle's art department, I think it was art and design department, to bring computers into the art curriculum. And that's in 1969. And as I remember that period, they were still arguing about whether photography was an art because it had this kind of instrumentality of cameras and something that couldn't be a real art. And so how could I have a master's in physics and had a modest exhibition record. How could I get a position in an art department in Chicago? The answer really is that the art department in Chicago, the art and design department in Chicago, was really a third generation Bauhaus activity. The Institute of Design is arguably at least a second Bauhaus, and students from the ID became a kind of leaders with the Instant University of the creation of Chicago Circle at that time in the mid-60s. And what they were interested in doing was bringing industrial design into the cybernetic age, which was the jargon at the time. And another way to think about it was to combine computers and industrial design to make a new synthesis, like perhaps the combination of the craft tradition and industrial production, creating industrial design. And that was kind of my mission, but I had no idea how long it was going to take, 40 years maybe or something like that. So around 1971, I got a grant to create the analog image processor. There's my image processor number 3 is on display in the show. And its basic inspiration was a general purpose analog computer, which was used for computation, much of the way that current digital computers are in the science and engineering, and the Moog Model 2 audio synthesizer, kind of combining features from both of those into the analog image processor. And Phil Morton at the School of the Art Institute and I spent a year of Fridays, actually, documenting it so that it could be copied by artists. And we produced a quality of documentation that allowed over 25 copies, most by practicing artists and small art institutions. And they're still in front of the image processor. In 1973, things got to be much more fun. Tom arrived with a digital system called the Grau system, which was a language combined with a holographic display in a facility we called the Circle Graphics Habitat at that time, kind of a short order media house for education and science research. And I'm going to show a little bit from there. If I can get it started. So there's the in front of the image processor. Phil Morton's running the cameras and stuff like that. And Tom DeFanti would mostly be on camera. Oops, audio. So, and what you're seeing there is the output of the instrument we'll be describing in a minute. I almost made this presentation without videotape, but then at the last minute I threw out a bunch of stuff.
Hey, Cross-Eye. I've been reading this paper here we wrote for the National Computer Conference, and it gives a pretty good idea about the technical and computer science type things we did in this laboratory, but it doesn't give a very good idea how much fun it is around here. A little tour of this laboratory in the chemistry department. We'll take you over the computer here. This single bay houses the graphics computer, And this down here, of course, is the PDP 1145 computer. Behind this panel is 28,000 words of memory. This here is the disk drive, the mass storage medium we use to hold pictures and macros and other information used to run the graphic system. Up here is the A to D converters, which allow us to use dials and knobs and sliders and other things to control images. From the computer's memory go wires that go over to the vector general. And as you can see, the vector general is capable of putting up images in real time, rotating them around. What we do there is point TV cameras at them. Little TV cameras like this, which you can move around and center and get different parts of the screen. And then, because color is much more fun than black and white, we run cables over this way to a very colorful person, Dan Sandin, inventor of the image processor. Now, the basic way we do things here is that we take images from the vector general, route them via cables to the image processor, colorize them, and tape record them. Now, this particular system is sufficiently flexible enough to be used in performance context.
Okay, so with that system, we did a series of events, the EVE events, electronic visualization events, in 75 and 76. Those two events were in front of live audiences and was people working on the image processor. There's Phil Morton in front of the image processor. There's Tom DeFonte down in front of the grass terminal, turning dials and sliders and typing on the keyboard to cause real-time performance to happen. And here's Bob Snyder on the Fender Rose electromechanical piano, jamming together with us to produce these live concerts. And here's a picture of everybody. Quite a crew. Now, there's a number of people in this room who are at this concert. Would you all stand up, please? It's really the community that's associated with the work that Tom and I and many others have done at EPL that makes any of this stuff actually happen and actually be worthwhile. A little side is that Larry Cuba did all the computer graphics in the original Star Wars movie, utilizing the GRASS system and hardware and software from EPL. Tom DeFonte's languages, the GRASS, ZGRASS, and RT1, were really groundbreaking languages that gave artists an easy access to the programming environment with the kind of tools that they needed to create their art. And this went through several editions of hardware. There, we've already talked about the graphic symbiosis system. There's a Z80, which was based on game platform hardware, and the creation of its associated hardware, the Z-Box, as we called it, and produced a whole series of animations to videotape and installations that are like video games, and then ported to the PC and used for another community of artists. In this case, on the right is a large show we did at the Museum of Science and Industry called the Interactive Image. I'm talking just a moment about EVL. EVL itself is a combination of art and science, and it delivers art intelligence to science and science to artists. It systematically teaches the artists the technology, and probably less systematically teaches the scientists the art. And the idea there is Renaissance people, not necessarily Renaissance teams. Now, Renaissance teams are kind of like combinations of people with specialties. But even making those effective, it's very important that people with such a large divide as between the science and the arts often is presented to be able to work together. And we have a long tradition of creating new hardware and software systems, but most importantly, supporting communities of users in the arts and sciences to be able to do their work in a kind of elevated environment. Helping scientists understand and communicate their data and ideas, what's paid the bills for this whole operation. We also had the first degree granting program that was a formal collaboration of art and science departments, and that was in 1978. Now, jumping to the end of the time period of this exhibition is the classic cave, which over 10,000 participants in this VR environment in its first 2 years of operation. And there were permanent installations at GM, National Center for Supercomputing Applications, Argonne National Laboratories, and DARPA, and also in our institutions, Ars Electronica and the ICC in Tokyo. And we believe, we don't know the exact number, there are hundreds of caves worldwide. And here's what a modern cave looks like. This is the Sun Cave at UCSD that Tom recently built. And this is the Cave 2, which is at EVL, which I was part of the design of. And nearly a week from now, on November 7th, I'll be showing an interactive art piece in the cave called Particle Dreams and Spherical Harmonics. Thank you very much.
I just want to put two credits out there that didn't get in the slides, and I worked with them on the slides, so it's my fault too. Jamie Fenton was the co-author of Zgrass and was very, very important and stretched my mind in those days. We were roommates back then. And Greg Daw developed basically every cave past the very first one, and especially the Sun Cave, which has got 500 megapixels, half a gigapixel. And not only has it put up images, but as of yesterday, all of the 74 GPUs, graphics processing units in it, would turn into a cluster for machine learning. So this thing can not only generate images, but it can learn about them. I don't know what it does, but in any event, it's a major machine learning edition that's available to our colleagues. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you. So, one other thing. So 30 years ago, approximately 31 years ago, when you had the show at Fermilab, remember Ellen? Yeah, so I hate writing artist statements. And so my artist statement was a C++ syntactically correct program about Ellen Sandor. Remember that? Yeah.
And now we'll have a presentation by Jamie Faye Fenton. And we're going to, so if you will switch a couple of technical switches. And I will add to this segue that for any of you of younger generations who remember playing Flash games, does anyone remember playing Flash games on the internet? Flash games. You remember Flash games? I'll say it one more time. Also, that came from Flash before was Director. Does anybody remember authoring with Director, right? Okay, so what came before that was Jamie Faye Fenton. So she's the person who makes all of that possible by contributing to it and by creating the basis for the evolution of those technologies. So she's been involved in software development, games development, art and music, and we're going to see some happen live in front of us.
Otherwise, it'll be okay. Anyway, is audio working? Okay, thank you. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks for having me here. It's really great to come and meet up with some of my friends from a long, long time ago and see what they've turned into. In any case, I got started here because I dropped out of college to become a video game engineer. And I was probably one of the first 3 video game engineers that ever existed. This was for a company called Dave Nutting Associates, or DNA. And DNA had 2 people in it, David Nutting, who's an industrial designer, and Jeff Fredrickson, who's a hardware designer. And Jeff and David came up with the invention of using a frame buffer to do video games. And so they got a patent on it. And so I was employed by them first to do pinball machines, and I switched over and started coding video games. And so I did a couple of video games, and we said, wouldn't it be nice to make a game for the home? And this was sort of back when Pong, you could buy Pong for your home and so forth. So we decided to do something better than Pong. And so we started working on this thing eventually became called the Bally Astercade. And I have one of them here. Everyone can look at. Hopefully it'll work. Let's see. We may need another. Yeah, I think we're on to that point. We may need to switch HDMI here, there, and we're not seeing anything yet. This guy's on. Believe it or not, this is typical of the demos I did back then. Demos we do now. This guy on. Yes, okay, this guy's coming on. Yeah, there we go. Been doing this sort of thing since second grade. They had me run the projector. But in any case, so this is actually a demonstration program. And there you see is a glitch from glitch art. We'll talk a little bit more about how that came to be. But anyway, so I was the software lead on the project. Jeff Fredrickson designed the hardware. We made two very fateful decisions when we designed this hardware. One of them is we decided we'd make the video that came out of it NTSC legal, so it can be recorded on any video cassette recorder. And the second thing we did is we put in buffers. And what a buffer is it's a type of basically integrated circuit that you can put on an interface to make the interface robust so that you could insert the cartridge while the game was on. Nobody else would let you do that. What that meant is that you could take the cartridge out while the game was on. And that could cause all kinds of interesting things to happen. Let's see if I do this right, boom. Sometimes you get a better glitch than others. There you go. So there's glitch art. But in any case, so we did this roughly about the time we were starting to complete the design of the circuits that went in here. I took a plane ride to California for a video game conference. When I was out there, I bought a book called Computer Lib Dream Machines, which was written by Ted Nelson, who's also a famous character in the new media movement, if you will. And they had an article about Tom DeFonte and Dan Sandin. And I read it and I said, boy, those guys sound cool. So I went in and crashed one of their classes and got to meet them. And eventually, one of the first things Tom did is he had a place up in Wisconsin, and he took me up for a weekend when I wanted to not think about computers. So he taught me how to fall off motorcycles because he had dirt bikes, and this was like snow on the ground and ice everywhere. And so it was crazy. But anyway, Tom eventually became involved with ballet and did all kinds of wonderful things with us. I was tasked to help him write Zgrass. And sort of on the way of building Zgrass, I was asked to write a demo cartridge. What a demo cartridge is it's a program that you run, stick one of these guys in, that demonstrates it's used to demonstrate the product. And I hated doing this. So what I did instead, I thought if I could get out of writing the demo cartridge if I came up with something else. So I wrote a basic interpreter in about 5 days that was an adaptation of it was called a Tiny Basic. And so what we did is they liked it a lot. And so we wound up creating a basic cassette, which here's an example of. And it had this keyboard overlay that you put over this calculator keyboard. And you could actually enter commands like, print and go to and stuff like this. And so that wound up being used by a lot of artists in the Chicago area and around the world. Eventually, as I say, I worked with Tom on Zgrass. Eventually, he took the chipset that went into the game and it went into the RT1 project and so forth, which you'll learn more about later. But it was an incredible time. I never realized while I was in the middle of all this what a wonderful thing it was. And now that I look back and I realize that I got a lot of positive aesthetics imbued in me. Keep it simple, make it so everybody can use it. I'm really grateful. And so in any case, this is, I guess I've already given the little demo on how to make glitch art now twice, but what we did is we did okay, I'll back up a little bit. There was a time when we were all up in a place in Wisconsin, we were all hanging around, and I was one was using a drug called ALD52, which is like LSD, and we actually saw I was playing around with this game, and I got it to make a glitch that repeated for a long, long time. And so this was during dinner time. So we called, that came up with, that's where the title for the game, for the product piece called Digital TV Dinner came from. And we've been trying to recreate that kind of magical glitch ever since. We couldn't really do it when we were training. So what we did is we made multiple takes and we cut them together to make what Digital TV Dinner is. But if you go look at the YouTube video I made a couple months ago, I actually got a pretty good glitch that went on for maybe about 10 seconds. So here we go. We can make a few more. Okay, let's see. Go after it. It's very much of a pull the lever on the slot machine and see if you hit the jackpot or not type of process. Not that time. The sort of the easiest way to get one is you hit reset and eject at the same time. There we go. That was the most common one you see. But in any case, we got some really good ones on the Digital TV Dinner video, and occasionally come across them. But again, it's like playing a slot machine game. I'm trying to remember if there's other things I wanted to say, except that eventually I wound up sort of drifting off back into game design and working. A friend of mine named Mark Cantor and I got together and started a company called Macromind, and we built multimedia authoring tools. And I went off to California to work for Alan Kay and ... But this is probably here in Chicago is the best time I had ever. So I'm glad to see the people that helped create so much wonderment for me again. Thank you.
We will switch over again, and we will have a presentation by Sabrina Raff.
Hello. Hi. Greetings. Great to be here with you. I'm here actually every day. I teach here, but it's great to be here with this crowd in particular. I have to say it's an amazing gathering, and I just wanted to say thank you to Jon and to VGA and Gallery 400 for putting it all together. So by way of introduction, this is Grower, the little robot that's awaiting your attention in the gallery next door that you get to see this evening. I wanted to give you a little bit of the perspective of a young new media artist coming to Chicago in 1999 and how I was influenced by some of the artists that I met here who were really seminal in shaping the community and the new media scene at the time. When I came here in 1999 in order to study art and technology at SAIC. And I very soon started hearing of this mysterious lab somewhere in the city where artists and technologists and programmers and engineers, computer scientists were all working together on this really fringy, innovative, cutting edge stuff, and where artists and engineers like really appreciated each other's talents and abilities. And so after some sleuthing, I found out that this was EVL. And Even while I was in grad school at SAIC, I began taking classes over at the EVL just to get access or to infiltrate, to get access to that community. And I began taking classes in VR and learning Yggdrasil, which was this really difficult programming language. Anyway, VR didn't end up being my thing, but just getting involved with that community at EVL was sort of game changing for me. Just to even see that type of environment where artists and technologists were together and working communally on these projects that were long-term projects. So I began teaching in Chicago and kept checking the job ads at UIC until eventually there was an opening and got it, and here I am. So when I started here, the New Media Arts program was actually called Electronic Visualization. And that's because of this incredible legacy started by Tom Navanti and Maxine Brown and others, whereby the two programs, the New Media Art and Electronic Visualization, were sister programs, and students could go back and forth. And the newest iteration of this that I'm very proud of, that I wanted to announce to you all, is that we've reinvented it, and we now are going to be offering the very first joint dual degree program between the arts and computer science. So that's just launching this year. And that again is all due to that incredible legacy started by EVL. So when I began studying at the Art Institute, there were many different sort of modes of operating as new media artists. And at the time, when you're young, you don't really know, much about it. You sort of think like, oh, they're all kind of equally as legitimate or equally as representative of what's really out there. But after a while, you kept seeing sort of conflicts amongst them. And I think understanding and seeing the conflicts amongst the different sort of models for operation as a new media artist out in the world, how do you propagate your work? How do you sustain the work? How do you fund the work? This was really essential. And it was a really, and it still is a really incredible place to be practicing as a new media artist. So Sean Decker is a sound artist still working and teaching at SAIC. And I put him up front because the way he works is these large-scale installations that were commissioned by different museums and exhibition sites. So not making the work as sort of gallery ready, but doing very much site-specific work that would be, formally commissioned beforehand, and then really catering the work to that environment. And this brought him all over the world. And this was some of the mixture of sort of earlier and later work, but whereby you can see he would string the different environments or the different spaces with this piano wire and little servo motors that were, or stepper harmonics that would just fill the space. Very beautiful. Andrea Poli, she was actually teaching at Columbia College and at SAIC, and she was like the preeminent artist researcher. And she would do work that was funded by the National Science Foundation on wind patterns over the Queensboro Bridge, or on air pollutants seeping into the Navajo Nation area terrain, and visualization of thunderstorms visualization of that data, and partitioning it into like completely spatialized sound, 24-track sound. Amazing stuff. Claire Pentecost actually was, or still is, in the photo department over at SAIC, but her work spans many different areas. And I think she was extremely influential. She worked also with the Critical Art Ensemble. And her practice was about interrogating the imaginative and institutional structures that organize divisions of knowledge, and often focused on nature and artificiality. So it's her kind of critical eye and dissection of gallery culture and propagation of works that influence, again, like a whole generation of new media artists about how their work could fit within that economy. Eduardo Katz, oops, I'm sorry, I missed, oh, weird. I know, okay, a little bit out of order, okay. Yeah, and so this is a statement by the Critical Art Ensemble that was influential on a group of second-year grad students in the Art Institute program, including myself, that caused us to form our own collective upon graduation. And I'll just read it out to you for a moment, because it's very challenging to be it was and still is really challenging to be a new media artist because of all the different levels of expertise and social navigation of the gallery realm. So as it goes, collectives are not wanted in the public sphere, in the educational system, or the cultural market in the limited sense of the term. So why would CIE be so in favor of collective cultural action? The market wants individuals with lots of skills for maximum exploitation, a veritable return to the Renaissance man. An artist must be able to produce in a given, oops, what just happened? Oh, glitch. There you go, glitch. An artist must be able to produce in a given medium, write well enough for publication, be verbally acute, have a reasonable amount of knowledge of numerous disciplines, including art history, aesthetics, critical theory, sociology, psychology, world literature, media theory, history, and given the latest trends, the various sciences. Be a capable public speaker, a career administrator, and possess the proper diplomatic skills to navigate a variety of cultural subpopulations. Certainly some rare individuals do have all of those skills, but the individual members of CAE do not. Consequently, we can only meet this standard by working collectively. And I think that's still true. And it's one of those things that we kind of constantly battle with in terms of education in new media. How do you teach students to sort of embrace a more collective practice? Because trying to fill all these roles is really, there maybe a select, genius or two is out there, but for the most part, it's not a really viable model to work individually. Eduardo Cates. A very recognizable image, right? He's always great at creating the recognizable image. It's one of his strengths. So the GFP bunny, glowing bunny, many of you remember from the early 2000s. So this was a project where he had a GFP gene that was added to, I believe it came from jellyfish, right? That is added to the DNA of developing lab animals, including rabbits, in order to make certain parts of the DNA markers glow. And so this was controversial because he actually created a glowing bunny, sort of glowing, glows under certain lights, that for art's sake, and whether or not that was okay. And so this was also kind of a mind-blowing moment to see this kind of art and biology clash, not only just of the programming and technology sciences, but biological sciences integrated into new media arts. So after graduation, or actually just about towards graduation, we formed, myself and 7 other artists, formed a collaborative called Synapsis, which is like, now looks like such a cliche, kludgy name. I mean, it's sort of like complex and very new media programming, like got to use a double colon there. And we did quite a few shows together because we really wanted to define our own presence within the gallery realm in Chicago. It is difficult as an individual new media artist to find the appropriate sites which can support the work and maintain the work. So we really wanted to define things on our own terms, and it was successful. So we, as it says, the artist group Synapsis Experiments creates kinetic and robotic art events that attempt to introduce concepts from biology and artificial life into their installations in order to investigate complex behaviors and interactive structures. So we did several shows, and we had to deal with things like, bubble gum in the show. Ken Ronaldo had a piece that chewed bubble gum. And so it was just with a heat light on it. So there's these 2 plates that came open and closed. And there was a big pile of, sort of like Halloween, a big bowl of gum at the gallery entrance. And you got to chew your gum and put it on these plates. And then it would create these big, smelly, juicy strings of gum. And very different kind of types of interactivity than you might normally have in even a typical new media show. So again, it's sort of navigation of the structures of all the health and safety regulations that we ran into with that one. And little armies of drawing machines by Fernando Ollana. This was a sound piece by myself called The Hum, monitoring all the sort of gallery electronics, the gallery directors, hard drive and telephones and security cameras and creating music based on those activities. Steve Boyer, who's a wonderful sound artist, architect, and interface designer, doing his own audio performances, creating these beautiful, these are all his own handmade interfaces that visualize the sound. And then very soon after, a number of the artists in that group created Applied Interactives, which was hosted at Arden. So big shout out to Ellen Sandor. That's how I got to know her as well. So Todd Margolis and Fernando Oriana and others. We developed a group of artists working with VR technologies because, again, how do you figure out how to do these things on your own as an individual artist? So it was kind of a creative group, but also an exhibition group. And yeah, we installed the sort of individual seawall portable VR system to try to introduce it into more gallery and exhibition environments. I also have to do a shout out to Rob Ray. I don't know if anybody remember him. Really, really wonderful artist and curator. He's not in Chicago anymore, but I think any show about new media arts and art history in Chicago in the early 2000s, you've got to mention Rob Ray. He's this kind of crazy, eccentric, wonderful human. I was trying to find the picture of him in his red thong from the art tour. Like it was his favorite performance accessory. I couldn't find any online, fortunately. Maybe fortunately, because that image just kind of burned into my mind. So I think he really understood it. He showed some amazing people, the Beige Programming Ensemble, Trevor Paglin, Norman White. And he knew that even as a new media became a term very common, he said, it became more understood as alternative rather than new. And it was about creating a space that could support alternative works. And I'll read a little bit here. He said, we took a fresh look at our assets and realized the biggest one we had was time. A commercial space or somewhere like the Cultural Center never has time. A tech-based art is a pain to suss out and painful to install. So we could work with artists that really wanted to do almost anything, almost a residency type install, or try something new in the actual space. So that was an incredible opportunity in Chicago for young media artists to just get access to that space and see that model. There's a place for them. And speaking of, so I'm going to do a tip of the hat to VGA, because I see this as like the next generation of where it's so needed for a space. The VGA Video Game Art Gallery, as Jon Cates mentioned, is this new space in Chicago that supports young independent video game artists and their work, which is, again, a frontier within the arts and needs representation in a place for people to congregate and speak. So that is it for me.
So at this point, I would ask everyone who's presented to take a seat here, and I would also ask that I think we have a microphone that is a wireless microphone that Lorelei is holding above her head. So let's just immediately open it up, and if anyone has something they've been thinking about or connected to any of the presentations. Anyone?
Anybody? Mine's very loud. No questions, comments?
Yeah.
Just know it's really loud.
Hi. Oh, yeah, it is loud. So you guys have obviously worked in technology and seen how things have evolved and continue to evolve. And so it's a two-part question. One, what do you think its impact is on society today, like from where it's been and where we are and how it's influenced current events? And also, what do you think is going to happen in the future? We saw VR kind of pop and then go away and things like that. So curious to see what you guys think is going to happen in the future.
Yeah, of course, it's a super complex question, but I think our current environment, in a nutshell, is a more and more encoded reality where I think what is most powerful right now is the convergence of AI and big data that leads to the coding, but then also on a visual level, as you said, this third wave of VR or augmented reality, which we see more and more, an overlay of realities. I think all of that work would not be possible without all of you here. I mean, it may look very different from an early cave, but that is also part of that genealogy of what's possible. I think what is most important today is really create new ethical standards. What I'm most worried about are the biases in machine learning, in AI, also demystifying AI. There's this whole strand of popular culture that is really all about, oh, the machine's taking over. And yes and no, they're not going to be robots attacking us, but the machines have already taken over in many ways and encode our life in problematic ways. So I think the future right now, when it comes to technological development, really goes into AI and machine learning on the one hand, and then I think a new level of immersive spaces, also for cinema, for entertainment. I mean, it's only now that VR has reached a level where you can really experiment with interactive feature films, etc. But I don't want to cover it. But once again, you know, all of the work that we have seen laid the groundwork for those levels.
So what we always try to do and continuing to do is to create disruptive technologies that push the conventional, which become very expensive systems because they get markets and get more and more expensive. But with video, with small computers, right? And all the other computers were huge. When video sold you toothpaste on 3 channels of TV, you know, we did the opposite. And the same thing is true even in virtual reality. And then into, there was never any commercial virtual reality to speak of, but pushing that tech. And now with the artificial intelligence and mixture of all these, we're building systems that you can use, you know, that you don't have to be the government or a major corporation. And then we get those into the hands of artists, and then you turn the crank once in a while.
You're going to live a very long time. Do you understand that? I mean, there are major, major things on the horizon. We're kind of old, okay?
Yeah, we're the last
And what
generation to die.
in all honesty, telomerase will happen, gene editing will happen. You're going to live a very long time. And if the crazies who are in power don't destroy us, it's going to be a joyful existence. Understand that the babies today understand things that took me 30 years, and even maybe transcend these 2 geniuses over here. I'm not sure. So you know it. You intuitively understand what the future will hold. And it's not bad. We're going to have a little fun, right, guys?
Well, well, this thing here has the current version of this architecture, of course, would be one of these things. And believe it or not, Jeff Fredrickson, who's the engineer that designed this, works on these things now. So the future's here in one respect. In terms of AI and that sort of thing, I actually look at it as like I'm getting brain boosted. You know, I no longer get lost. I no longer forget appointments. I no longer I don't have to go to the library to research anymore. All these things that used to be a pain are now super easy because I'm just part of this network. I'm actually part of it. It's not something else. It's just me and my extension. So I imagine we'll have a lot more of that. I don't know if we'll quite be in the Woody Allen future world where everybody is a mediocre artist or a writer. But we'll see where we wind up. Anyway.
I'll just I mean, I think that you'll see more and more integrated media. It's hard to say that there's going to be one realm within new media or an evolution of new media. I think you just see much more integration between disciplines in general, and a blurring of lines of the disciplines, and that's really wonderful and liberating for everybody involved. So I don't know that it has to follow this sort of linear progression, north into like, okay, we're just going to do gaming or machine learning or whatever. I think you're seeing students coming out with these Renaissance sets of skills now that in a way that they aren't doing this sort of completely individualized studio art practice, or they're trained in a sort of different mode of operation. So I think even for them, just sort of creating a name for a practice that is based on their singular name is not always the priority anymore. So it's a whole mind shift.
One more statement, say. One of the things we've been struggling in since the post-92 era, was this earlier than that, in which we relied very heavily on videotape, to document things, and actually did a reasonably good job. We could do good performance documentation, and the things that we did, Dan and I did, and our colleagues and students said, was recordable. And then we got into VR, and it was no longer recordable, and we have no record of any of these things that we did for years. And we still don't have very good records. So as you're dealing in multiple dimensions, the best thing you do is go on YouTube and hear somebody talking about, something. And to me, that's always been like compressing, images into a single period and saying, okay, artists, you get to use one dot. That's it, one dot. And that's all you get. Now go to it, one dot. And that's what taking 4 dimensions down to 2 is the same as taking 2 dimensions down to 0. And we have not figured that out. We don't have any way of preserving the stuff, recording it, communicating it, and it's a real problem.
Just quickly picking up on that, I think this is really one of the pressing problems, and we may have major gaps in history, which is partly connected to what Oliver said. I mean, the lack of institutions stepping up to really collect works. Preservation has, since the 90s, really made enormous progress. I think conservation is way ahead of, let's say, collection and archiving of the work. So now we have pretty solid best practices. There are organizations like Rhizome having developed tools that allow you now to do dynamic recordings of Instagram performances, whatever. But as you said, that whole early area of VR, of immersive environments, is just not documented. If you had videotapes, you could at least transfer them to digital, but a lot of history is actually lost.
And what about the collectors? They've spent a lot of money on a piece, and then the technology becomes obsolete. Do you know what Nam June Paik did? Right before he died, for many of our pieces, he wrote something and said, this is what you can replace it with. And you had to find the thing to replace it. So those collectors who were really obsessive about making sure it's original, et cetera, that was comfortable. But how do we do preservation when we're trying so desperately to put new media into collections when we don't know what the next tech is? Where is Donna Plepis? Is she here? When she has to spend her life now trying to make sure that the wonderful video documentations of SIGGRAPH get preserved. Or Kalani, when you're trying to get images into collections, how do you deal with people who are still saying, what about the value? What's going to happen? These are all questions that you have to gravel with the museums, I'm sure, every single day.
Yes and no. Once again, I think we really have great conservators and great practices in place. The point is more of institutions making the commitment to bringing the work into the collection. I think that is the problem. So artists do not have to spend a lifetime babysitting their work. So I think the practices, once again, are there, but the work isn't in the collections and nobody's taking care of it. That's the problem. I think Oliver has a lot to say about
Not a lot, but something to in support of yours, what you just said. It's the case studies are all there. The knowledge to preserve it's existing, but now it's as you said, that we need a new infrastructure for that. So the museum, as we know, it's a 200-year-old institution. It was made. Louvre was the first one, and was made for to collect paintings and sculptures. It was very well qualified for that, but it was not made for the digital age. And so in Germany we have 6,500 well qualified for that, but it was not made for the digital age. And so in Germany we have 6,500 museums, 700 are dedicated only to art. And if we would use the federalism in Europe, you could use it also in the US, saying, okay, if 10% of the museums just would participate in a concerted effort to share the responsibility and to share the knowledge, then we would have enough momentum and enough capacity to say, okay, Bavaria, you're responsible for interactive artworks, Brandenburg, you're responsible for bioart, and so on. And then we would create a kind of a network where we would at least can preserve the 1 to 6%, which came down to us from the art of the past. So after all those wars, that's actually a number. If we would at least achieve at that number with the digital art, we would have already achieved something. So at this point, we lose everything, and so there's a new art outside, but the museums they became much more than in the past. But the structure, the fundamental structure of the museum and of the library and of the archives, they have not dramatically changed. And so we need to put in a new layer above all these many museums.
I think your museum is much more progressive than a lot of the museum boards that I'm on, and I'm very, very, very envious of it.
Can't say no in public.
And we can also say that Ellen, you have a collection individually that is also, you've taken on this responsibility in terms of preserving your work and other people's work by collecting it as well. This is also
every single day, but the real heroes are in the trenches. Donna Plepis, she's in the trenches, and that's one of the preservation heroes.
Right.
Yeah.
And so simultaneously, for instance, Jamie, when you said that you would be able to bring a functional Bally Basic and you would be able to render out for us this glitch art from 1979, this is a very exciting moment for me. And so, because it's also the people's individual responsibilities and the people, the artists and the developers and scientists taking the responsibility on themselves to preserve their own work and to maintain even the platforms that make the work possible.
Yep.
I have a
oh, that's okay.
Question for the group, specifically for Jamie, Tom, and Dan. One of the hopes for the exhibition, I know, was to draw attention to the interrelationships between the different communities in Chicago, whether it was at UIC, at SAIC, at Williams, Bally Midway. I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit more about those relationships and what they were like.
Well, I'll jump in there. So, as Jamie said, he found us, but one of my grad students, Larry Lesky, who's still a friend and godfather of his son, you know, I mean, we're well connected. So he's in and lives in Las Vegas now. But he was a grad student of mine and went off to work for Dave Nutting Associates and brought us into that fold. Now, at that point, I got dragged into this thing, and Atari and Bally, who was Midway's parent company, were using more computer random access memory and read-only memory between the two of them than the entire rest of technology, right? And there were people putting more quarters into video games than that was reported, than we're spending dollars, you know, same, more money in video games than at movies and on commercial television. Now that was a little sweet spot there, you know, but we plugged right into it. And we had great dreams. And we had the Encyclopedia Britannica involved and all this kind of stuff. And it all blew up because Bally decided the Texas Instruments was going to wipe them out and they couldn't possibly compete with Speak and Spell. So they just gave it all away. But in the meantime, what had happened is we had amassed all this stuff and we built systems specifically for students. And these are the ZGRAS systems. And they went out to the Art Institute and so on. Meanwhile, you know, the other thing that happened was we were graduating students or pushing students through, and they were going to places like Williams and to the other and formed, you know, mentioned Macromedia. You know, they're just all over the place. And that's a really important, in terms of documenting in a real sense, you know, that's the documentation. The students are the documentation. It's what they've left with, what they took with them, what they created elsewhere was really it. And we just opened their minds. And so that was the relationship, really. School Arts Institute, of course, had Phil Morton, and with all the incredible things he did with his video talents and aesthetics, which I certainly, you know, get better every year. So that was the relationship.
Yeah. Also, there's a whole video community with the Chicago Editing Center, Center for New Television, Media Burn. And, you know, we galleries and we weren't particularly interested in showing our work. And if we tried to do anything like a conventional show, we wouldn't have the means of production because they didn't own stuff to play this back even. You know, so we'd do things at bars and we'd do things, we'd arrange for things in lobbies and other places. But there really was a larger community. And then there was a whole wing of the video production people that were more focused towards community organization and, you know, expression of political ideas and stuff. All of that was kind of mixed together into an amazingly cooperative group, you know, that would like, you can borrow my equipment, you can like, we'll do stuff together. And very little competition and very little worry about who was getting credit for what. It was just make this stuff happen. This is our dreams. We're just going to make it happen.
I also would like to add a question to Dan and Tom, what you just said. So I was wondering if there's maybe kind of a difference generation-wise. So when we looked for, we have a project, for example, which looks on clusters of theme clusters of contemporary digital art topics. So where migration is getting stronger, surveillance is still very strong, virtualization of finance markets. So these big complex questions nobody can really understand. They are visualized by artists to bring them also into the political discussion. And I wonder, so what the political vision in the time when you created the image processor was. So I can see so much this social element of it, of your art, the playfulness, also the creativity, the emancipative part of it. So how you look really to the human being as an interactor and to enliven the creative moment and even an ars combinatoria, so speaking on art historic terms. So I would like, maybe you can comment on that a little bit.
Well, I don't think there was a shred of politics in anything we did. We had actually, you know, personal politics, but not big politics. What? Tell me what?
No.
What? Gunfight?
Hey, I had a socialist soul. They were to the left of the socialist soul.
Yeah, but we were sufficiently leftist.
It's all good. It was all good. It was all good. It was a magical mystery tour, and they were absolutely giving it away. And was how wonderful that somebody like Barbara did these amazing video pieces. And the aesthetic was developed because you had the freedom to do these pieces. And they were absolutely beautiful. They weren't necessarily the abstract, incredible visions that are so historically important, Dan, but they were absolutely stunning. They were narrative, and you went on to do this for decades and decades, and all because they opened their doors so that you could have your chance to do this. And I want to thank you. You inspired me for a long time. So thank you, Barbara Seid.
Me too.
Okay.
Me too. But so our politics was no politics. I'll agree with that.
Of course, your politics was the whole basis of the world.
I think there's a different way of looking at it, which I have researched in a different context. Like, for example, the early days of the web, the time when you were creating work was very much about creating the tools for people and experimenting with the tool sets and creating the technology that made all of that possible. It wasn't yet governed by this corporate infrastructure, etc. That the early days of the web were exactly like that. If you compare the art that was created then, which was equally like participatory sites where you could do collaborative drawing studios, and then look at NetArt 2.0, you know, that is highly, in a good way, highly aggressive in infiltrating corporate platforms, infrastructures, questioning them, taking them apart. I think it's just, you cannot apply the same standards because the political act may have been to create these aesthetic platforms and tools that could take expression to a different place. And now that's a different, it's a very different engagement. You know,
So
that
I agree with you there, because the politics was essentially disruption. I mean, politics is open source, right? So the reason why the web, and we were right in the middle of it, the reason why the web exploded, why NCSA Mosaic took off, is because it was open source, it was made free. Now, that may not seem like much, except for the fact that the federal government and all its agencies have procurement issues. And if they have to buy something, they have to compete it, and so on and so forth. But because Mosaic was free, they didn't have to do that. And the Clinton White House, and Al Gore, and basically told the agencies, I was there in the room, they told the agencies, a month from now, I want you all to have a web page.
Good.
And they did that, and it just exploded. And we had collected, Maxine and I and Donna had collected all this material from SIGGRAPH 92, right? It was 300 megabytes, which is an inconceivable amount of information back then, of scientific examples using the web. So not trivial stuff, but really people doing really good things. And we made a big slug out of it so it couldn't get corrupted. And we took this on a roadshow. One of our students, Joanna Mason, was the Katie Couric of the web. And she went and took this out to all of these agencies. And you know, and it just poof went. And it was because
so
it was
in
open
other
source.
words, what he's saying is literally EVL inspired Mosaic that then became Netscape. So because of their
wait, just wait a second.
Yes, I'm
it was
telling the truth.
It was NCSA.
No,
it was NCSA. We just provided the first content.
Let me talk. Let me just say, okay? I'm not saying it wasn't NCSA, but the politics of Tom and Dan and this whole sort of creative open source, you know, feeling that inspired Larry Smarr to actually hire Mark Andreessen. But do we know the person, the woman who actually did the interface as far as the first web? Could we yell out her name? Where is Janine there? Colleen Bushell actually did the work. And that, yes, and she's in the book, of course. But again, Dan and Tom created the environment. And what Al Gore really did, and when I speak to him, I tell him this all the time. Everyone made fun that, oh, Al Gore invented the net. What he really did was created the political environment and actually pushed and pushed so that it can all happen. It was the real thing.
He funded.
Yes, it was the real thing. It really happened. So these guys really did. They really did. They're really one of the major variables responsible for the whole net and web revolution. And that wasn't mentioned. And that doesn't mean, you know, art saves and tough art really saves, but they really did help make this whole revolution occur as far as Mosaic that became Netscape.
And also in this environment of art and games, which is the core intersection that VGA Gallery works on and that we're expressing in the exhibition, is this intersection of art and games. But also critically important is, and the Bally basic system was designed for this, for art, for games, and for music. And so I think it's really important for us to also understand that music as a creative practice and sound art as a creative practice is incredibly important. Another participant exhibiting in the exhibition, and so that you understand that the musical part is really important, is Bob Snyder. And Bob Snyder is here with us today. We have to thank Bob Snyder. Who founded the sound department at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and who was a deep collaborator with all of the people here today. So really, one of the founders as well, Bob Snyder. And this whole moment, this whole environment is important on so many different levels. We're so thankful for everyone being here today, from coming from different places, and also coming here to be here in the audience and on the internet in Chicago, where we are identifying that this work emerges from and responds to and feeds back into. I do need to tell you that we have a catalog for this exhibition, and it is a catalog that you can purchase for $19.95. I also need to tell you that we are coming up on the time that we have allotted for this portion, but we are looking very much forward to the opening, which is opening in about an hour. So we'll open the gallery doors in about an hour, but now we're going to take a little bit of break. And hopefully what this has done, this amazing panel of luminaries, has opened up this conversation, a lot of ideas that you've had swirling around, and so we can have the conversation now amongst each other and with each other. Let's all thank everyone who's here on the panel. One last announcement as we're breaking. We really do, Oliver just asked me, and it's really, we would love to have a photograph with those of you who are here in the audience, those of you that are here on the panel. We would love to have a photograph all together of people from this moment, this era, and this moment right now. So let's have a group photograph. If you can stick around, please stick around.